Well, all righty. Welcome in, Eric, Richmond, people that are maybe joining us. Let's talk about some of the injuries this week. But first, Eric, how was your fantasy week?
Brutal for the injuries, and especially coming up on another bipocalypse. It's going to be tough to fill some rosters.
Don't get me started on the bye weeks. We don't need to talk about that here.
Not again.
Not again. Richmond, how's your fantasy week?
I think there were more wins than losses, so that's good. Um, there are some weird plays this week due to injuries, and I think that's going to happen. I guess injuries and bye weeks. I think it's going to happen again this week. My biggest win was forgetting to put Saquon Barkley in, and I still won the week somehow. So,
nice.
How do you forget to put Saquon Barkley in?
well, I thought I put him in, but I guess I accidentally played two tight ends. Yeah, it's complicated. Sunday morning mistakes.
What tight
bad
ends did you play?
Tanyan and Higby. I thought Higby was in my tight end slot, but it was actually in my flex spot, and that was Barkley's spot in the lineup. So everything, I don't know. I don't know how it
The
happened.
good news is Higby was one of our plays of the week last week, and he did solid.
He was.
Unfortunately, or I guess fortunately, depending on how you look at it, Case Keenum did not get his time to shine because Josh Allen did indeed end up playing, even though there was mixed reports even on day of that whether he was playing or not.
And they lost, and he threw two interceptions. So all I know is the
And a
Vikings.
fumble.
Yeah, the Vikings better be happy that it was not Case Keenum's revenge game.
That was a white flag plant. If you played Case Keenum, you were just waving the white flag.
And then Lazard, who, there was a Green Bay receiver that went off. Just unfortunately, it was the rookie Christian Watson.
Yeah, I picked the wrong baller, but it was clear that someone was going to go off. This just happened to be the first week that that they actually played Christian Watson in a less gadgety role, and he really balled out with his playing as a deep threat. But I think for the remainder of his targets, he was traditional Christian Watson, clapping his hands together like a 6-year-old to catch the ball, and he dropped some balls because of that.
Yeah, I mean, if he would have shared some of his touchdowns with Lazard, then it would have been all right.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the total Christian Watson coming out party that some people think it was, but he had a great game.
He did.
Yeah, great game.
It was fantastic. Well, let's move on.
Ball out.
Let's move on to I guess one of the big injuries of the week, Juju Smith-Schuster, who got knocked clean out. I was actually a little surprised they didn't cart him off. I mean, I know you're clearing them on the field with everything, but usually the NFL seems to take a more cautious approach there. What did you guys think of that?
Yeah, Matt, I remember texting you asking the same thing. I mean, they didn't cart him off. They were letting him turn his head. It seems like they were being very casual. I mean, like if I had just turned on the game, I would have thought that he just hurt his ankle, for instance. It would not have been clear to me that he had a head and neck injury. Right. So I think especially coming off of the big Tua fiasco, where the NFL is trying to put on the facade that they care about head and neck injuries and that athletes are safe, I think that this was a miss in terms of their acute triage of Juju. But I think, I mean, generally it's got to be a good sign for his health, right?
Oh, for sure. I mean, you're really clearing him, hopefully, of any neck or neurological issues. It's just then he's coming off the field and having to drape himself over to other players to even get off the field. So I don't know. It's just all very weird to me.
Yeah, I wonder how much of it is. I mean, if a player is really insistent on getting up, are you really going to like wrestle him down onto a cart on live TV? I mean, that could be a player insistence of I'm going to get up and walk myself off the field. So I feel like that could be.
I'm sure that played a role, but I don't know. It was all weird, but oh well, neither here nor there. Juju's in concussion protocol now. Did not participate today, right?
Yeah, he was out along with a lot of other receivers on the team.
Yeah. Chiefs receiving core is not looking up to snuff right now. Even if it's Richmond's favorite player is now
One
stepping
bright
up.
spot actually is trending up.
Yeah, Kadarius Toney had 90 all-purpose yards and a touchdown, so 4 catches on 5 targets.
Yeah, let's not forget he almost ran out of bounds on the touchdown when no one was within 25 yards on him. So
he also readjusted his gloves mid-route and then caught the ball. So
I missed that. That seems like a Kadarius Toney
running
thing
down the field, doing this to his gloves, and turns and catches the ball.
That's talent.
Yeah, I mean, Patrick Mahomes keeps saying like it's crazy how well he's doing for the fact that we're teaching him like so many positions to play and so many routes to run. So it seems like they're really hype about him in practice. So I'm hoping it just continues to keep escalating.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, with Juju, I mean, just keep an eye out when he starts practicing. You're really looking for him to get that full practice in before he's going to even be able to return to play. Doubt that happens this week at all. So going forward, because what was it? Tua got hit with his big concussion.
How many weeks was he out?
I think he was out 2 weeks.
Moving on.
Moving on. I would expect Juju to kind of be similar to the Tua instance. Matt Stafford, who missed last week, he was a full participant today with his concussion. I feel like he's gonna probably be playing this week, even though he's now missing his number one target. Which I guess we'll go ahead. Let's go ahead and talk about Kupp because that's the really big injury of the week. High ankle sprain is what they called it. He's having surgery. Now, Richmond, I believe you've talked about the high ankle surgeries before.
Yeah, we talked about the tightrope surgery before, or essentially they take the tightrope and they put it between the 2 lower leg bones, the tibia and the fibula, to kind of help provide some support in there. And they usually get back within 4 weeks, I think it is, in order to get back to playing on the field. So that's a good sign that he could bounce back pretty quickly, relatively to the injury, and be a little bit more full go, and a little bit more supported.
The Rams are doo-doo this year.
Yes. So would he rush back?
So that is the conundrum. He was placed on IR, so it is at least 4 weeks now.
Yeah. And we've seen athletes with, a lesser grade of this high ankle sprain try and return in, during the same season, and their production just isn't the same.
Yeah. I mean, for such a high volume guy, it's going to be interesting to see how that goes. But I mean, the biggest question is him and Matt Stafford still going to be able to have breakfast every morning in order to regain their chemistry?
Matt might have to do a house call. Now, dudes, Cooper Kupp on Keep Trade Cut, he dropped to wide receiver 10 in Dynasty. That puts him at just about the same value of ASRB and T. Higgins. How do you feel about that?
I mean, with the injury and he's a 30-year-old receiver, I mean, that feels probably right.
Yeah, I think he was a little bit overinflated on his position before this. So I think falling down a little bit is probably more realistic.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, he's nearing the age cliff for wide receivers, where just not many receivers do well after the age of 30. And now he's facing a significant injury to recover from. I mean, 2 weeks ago he was listed as wide receiver 3 in Dynasty, and that would put him just below Jamar Chase. But I'm
That's
with you
still so
guys.
crazy.
Yeah, I mean, he was hyper productive. Like
Sure.
if you were in the realm of a competing team, you want him on your team. But I'm with you. Like if I could sell him just to somebody who still respects the name Cooper Kupp, then I would sell him for that value in a heartbeat.
No, I agree. Do we think Allen Robinson has his resurgence finally?
No. I think that hamstring has really limited him, and he's another aging receiver who's probably fallen off the cliff.
Yeah, I agree.
Do we think the Rams just continue to be doo-doo?
I think so.
I think it's
I mean,
Higbee or bust on that offense.
I think it's Higbee. I think inconsistently it could be Van Jefferson. But he would be nothing that I want to count on
Yeah.
fantasy wise. But I think if anybody's going to move up a little bit, Van Jefferson's probably going to continue to accumulate now that he's back after missing most of the early season.
Yeah, it's just that Rams. They're so disappointing this year. Speaking of disappointing offenses, or I guess teams, Arizona Cardinals. Kyler Murray was a non-participant today with his hamstring issue that kept him out. But also his backup, Colt McCoy, has a knee injury. So what are we? I personally think, because it seemed like Kyler was kind of a game time decision last week. They got the Monday night game, so that makes it a little scary because you're waiting until Monday to really know if he's going to play or not. But I feel like he's probably leaning towards playing. What do y'all think? Richmond, any thoughts?
I don't know. I think before the show I was talking about leaning towards like being a little bit hesitant on calling Kyler Murray like having a good chance of playing. It would be nothing that I would want to depend on to see if he can make it back to play. So that I don't know if I can make a call there.
I think that they liked what they saw out of Colt McCoy, who's a very reasonable game manager. And I think that these hamstring injuries, we talk about it all the time. They're nothing to just shrug your shoulder at. You know, being conservative with them, if you consider yourself a playoff contender, is key. So even if this is like a grade 1 hamstring strain, which it likely is for Kyler Murray, you want Kyler Murray to get the rest because he's going to give you the best shot at competing, you know, after the next 2 weeks. And that's what it's all about.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they just beat the Rams without him, which, as we said, the Rams are not quite anybody important. Game against the 49ers coming up, so
yeah, it's a big game.
A little bit more significant game for them.
A little tougher. Yeah. A little tougher competition. But they could also have Marquise Brown back. He's back to practicing, eligible to come off. They activated. Well, they didn't activate him. I forget all the terminology now. They've said they've started his practice window. That's what it is. And so, Eric, do you think Marquise Brown plays Monday?
Man, I wouldn't if I was the coaches. I mean, there's two things that go into this. There's number one, you want to avoid recurrence of injury. If they really are considering themselves, you know, a competing team, then missing a week, you know, isn't that big of a deal when you consider long-term outcomes. The other thing to look into, you know, from a playing perspective is just being in game shape. I mean, how long has Marquise Brown not been able to sprint because of this foot injury? You know, it's one thing to go through a practice. It's another thing to play a game. So if I were the coaches, if I were Marquise Brown, I would be advocating, you know, hey, let me ease back into it. Let me be full go when it's time. But in the NFL, you never know. So they might fire him up on Sunday, but I'd still consider him a shaky play, especially if Kyler's out.
Yeah, no, I agree. I doubt he plays Monday. but it's nice to see him back practicing and getting ready to play. But if he is able to go and they're playing him, I mean, you have to fire him up, right?
Yeah, I mean, by namesake, but you just don't know what you're going to get. And DeAndre Hopkins is back to soak up the targets. So I think, unfortunately, if he's on your team, you're firing him up if he's playing, but you might be left with a dud.
Sort of a weird injury that everyone kind of, when they saw it, assumed the worst. But Jerry Judy's ankle issue. There was, fantasy football doctors coming out and saying that looks like Achilles. I watched the video. It did kind of look like Achilles, but then they kind of called it a mild ankle injury. So he didn't participate today, but Richmond, what do you kind of think the outlook is for Judy?
Yeah, I think he's a guy to keep an eye on and see how his week goes. Watching the video, it looks to me like his ankle got rolled up on, like an ankle sprain, like low ankle sprain. So the better of the two options. So I think that he has a real chance to play if it's not as severe of an ankle sprain as initially thought. And it's definitely not Achilles, so that'd obviously be a longer outlook for him. But I think if it is a true low ankle sprain, he has a shot to play this week.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be very cautious with Judy, assuming it is low ankle, where Judy, he makes his money being a route technician, right? And we've seen these low ankle sprains. Like, think about Jonathan Taylor and how he's been limited for how many weeks with this low ankle sprain. And now you're asking Jerry Judy to be a wiggly, shifty guy in the field. I mean, I think if he plays, you're just really asking yourself, like, what are you expecting?
And you're already kind of asking yourself that without the ankle issue.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Touche. What are we really doing here?
It's a tough position to be in. I mean, you're not really wanting to play anyone from that Denver offense anyway.
That's true.
Yeah, I think that's your first problem if you're really hanging anything on Jerry Judy being your starter. So,
touche.
But I digress. Worth mentioning, but we don't have to talk about it too much. AJ Brown was a limited participant today with an ankle issue. I was watching the game. He kind of tweaked it early, continued playing. They never really mentioned it again during it, so I guess it's still just kind of bothering him, but being limited, that's pretty much a pretty good sign, I would think. Another hamstring injury. Gus Edwards, he was a limited participant today. Pretty much goes back to, right, Eric? If Gus Edwards play, you're playing him. If not, then you're playing Kenyon Drake.
Yeah, it's a tough call either way, but Gus Edwards, when healthy, is hyper productive on that offense.
Yeah, I agree. If it's not him, I can't even hang my hat on Kenyon Drake being the play. That Ravens backfield is the whole Ravens offense is challenging to predict whose week it'll be, unless his name is Lamar Jackson.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say Devin Duvernay. Yeah, no, they're a weird offense to try to predict right now. Especially, let's just go ahead and talk about it. Mark Andrews, limited participant with his shoulder issue, kept him out the last time they played. So, I mean, I don't think it's going to keep him out. They've been saying it's very minor, but obviously it was serious enough to keep him out at least one game.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's just another one limited practice today. Just keep an eye on what he's doing. I can't remember what his status was last week.
Well, they were at bye week last week.
He was on bye week. That's right. So, yeah, I mean, you would imagine that hopefully it would have played if they had a game this past weekend. But it's hard to say. Just keep an eye on Isaiah Likely, I guess, if you're a Mark Andrews owner. And it seems pretty good that if Mark Andrews isn't there, Isaiah Likely is going to get some good targets.
Are you suggesting handcuffing a tight end?
I believe I am.
This is a novel approach for 2022.
What a time to be
When your
alive.
tight end is Mark Andrews and his backup is Isaiah Likely, I think that's a perfect recipe for handcuffing a tight end.
Yeah, you probably drafted Mark Andrews pretty high, and you're probably missing that production pretty heavily if he's out.
Yeah.
Now, should we have handcuffed Zach Ertz with Trey McBride? Now that Ertz is with his own season-ending knee injury?
I would say no. I mean, Ertz's production has been his underlying metrics have been low this year and year past, and I think it's difficult in a struggling offense to see that Trey McBride's snap counts are still considerably low, and it is tough to be a young tight end in the league and to be productive. I mean, Isaiah Likely is like, I don't know how likely it would have been for like another rookie tight end. Like he's virtually outplaying in fantasy production Kyle Pitts. I don't know if that's true, but it sure feels that way just by how
Definitely
much
feels that way.
right, just by how much we hung our hat on Kyle Pitts. But that is to say, like it's tough for young tight ends to be valuable. So
And a lot of the likely was, and it's not just Mark Andrews. It's their running backs are hurt, their receivers are hurt. Like,
Yeah.
there's not a whole lot there to not throw it. Whereas in McBride's case, okay, you still got Hopkins, you still got Rondale Moore, they still got James Conner,
Marquise Brown coming back.
Marquise Brown coming back soon-ish. I mean, so there's still, at best, he's probably the fourth option
Yeah.
in that offense.
It's tough.
really, that was the same for Ertz. So
Yeah. I mean, Likely was a good young tight end this year. Bellinger, before his eyeball incident, was a good young tight end. But again, I mean, who else is there to throw to in New York? So I think a lot of these young tight ends popping off are matter of circumstance.
yeah, I would agree. As someone that has a lot of McBride in dynasty leagues, I'm not expecting the world here. I just want to see him be involved, catch a couple passes and show me the future is bright.
He's not coming off my taxi for this.
Oh, no. And I don't recommend
Show me the future.
Another tight end, Cole Kmet, after his 2-touchdown game, was not participating today with apparently a thigh injury. Eric, can you shed some light to what's going on with tight end one, Cole Kmet?
No, it's incredibly vague. I think he'll play. I mean, there's only so many things that a thigh specific injury could be, and it sounds like something that you would rest and recover from. But to me, I would just be watching the practice reports and just making sure that he logs at least a full practice by Friday.
Yeah, no, I agree. Whenever they say thigh, I always think they probably took a weird hit there during the game, and they've got a pretty good bruise they're working through.
I agree. Hopefully it's some kind of contusion and it's not going to keep him out. And hopefully it's not like a quad strain, which could probably keep him out a little bit longer. But I mean, playing the position that he plays, I think a contusion's more likely.
I would agree. Just rolling through the tight end injuries here. Goddard for Philadelphia, who's I feel like kind of flown under the radar this year. He's been very solid, but just not one of the top tight ends, but kind of just consistently there in that tight end 7-8 range. Unfortunately, he's now on IR, and with a shoulder injury, we were trying to kind of piece it together on what exactly that can mean. Richmond, what kind of are we thinking with Goddard's injury?
Um, I'm gonna pass this one off to Eric
Oh, okay.
for
Well,
what
we
we
can go
talked
to
about
Eric.
earlier.
Yeah, I mean it was tricky. I was watching it live and it was really difficult to see the replay and even try and realize like well what part of him is hurt, which shoulder is hurt because he stiff arms the one guy while he's being tackled by someone else from behind. And then what it really seems like is like he landed on his left elbow and under the weight of someone else from on top of him on his back. And that's going to cause the ball in the socket joint of his shoulder to jam up on the backside of the socket. And with that, you could have any number of structural pieces of anatomy injured. We don't know the severity yet. It could be a fracture, could be a subluxation, it could be worse. I think if you're really thinking of like comparable worst case scenarios, like if you're just trying to realize like what happened here, and we've already talked about like Tua's hip injury years like way back, and that was like a similar type injury where he lands on his knee, the ball jams into the back of his socket, and Tua's was extreme. These are different socket joint styles, but the point is that the ball is now impacting the stability of that joint. It has disrupted the stability of that joint, so they're gonna be putting him on an IR. It could be season ending, but I think best case scenario is that it just disrupted the stability of that joint. He comes back. He's a yak monster. He makes his living on his feet. So I think optimistically you get him back in time for fantasy playoffs, but there's a real chance that he's just out for the year.
Yeah, and I think from an actual football Philadelphia case, they're just hoping he's healthy for their playoff run.
Yeah, and they've been a good team. They might not need him with all the weapons they have.
Yeah, I mean, I know they have a couple young tight ends, so I think they're going to get a good chance to look at. And Stoll and Calcaterra, he had a big catch earlier in the year for 40 yards. And Stoll seems like he got a few more plays and snaps with Goddard out. So I think might be some dynasty stashes there to see what's going on. But they also have Tyree Jackson floating around, but I think his time's a little bit past here.
Yeah, I think it's tough recovering from an ACL injury, and you're already converting from I think quarterback to tight end.
Yeah.
Sure. I'll just pretend I know who y'all are talking about.
Tyree Jackson was a DC defender.
You're such a casual, bro.
I'm sorry. I'm not ingrained in the dynasty format,
It's just NFC love, NFC East love.
Tyree Jackson was a Maction star. Quarterback at Buffalo.
Okay. Yeah, that would explain why I don't know who they are. Anyway, let's move on to really the only other big injury of the week, Khalil Herbert, who everyone, at least on the Twitterverse that I am a part of, screams is better than David Montgomery and should take over all the running back role for Chicago, is now on IR with a hip issue. I know, Eric, you were thinking possibly maybe a avulsion fracture. I mean, we're just kind of guesstimating off of what limited information we know, right? I mean,
yeah. I mean, it's like saying the hip. It could mean so many things, but there's already optimism out of his camp that he could return this season. So I think, given that he's on IR in the timetable that they're already setting, it indicates something that could be like a small fracture, and that would lend itself to an avulsion style fracture. But again, like you were saying, it's so broad. It could be a number of things. We just don't know.
All I know now is David Montgomery is no longer competing for that RB2 role in Chicago. He has fully taken it over. He will not be splitting time with Khalil Herbert because obviously Justin Fields is RB1 there. So there's that.
Perfect timing for me to trade away David Montgomery.
I think if you can get excellent value for him, do it.
Before the injury, I traded Justin Fields and David Montgomery for Austin Eckler. And I'm also a Lamar Jackson holder. So I thought this was a reasonable trade for me.
I like it. Redraft, I assume.
Redraft.
Okay.
1 QB.
Okay.
Let's clarify to the
I
masses.
figured that based on the trade, but
in my mind it was so clear.
No, Superflex Dynasty, bro.
14-team league.
IDP.
Yeah.
Well, guys, we got just a couple updates, I think. Some Chiefs receivers, MVS, we were kind of talking earlier, but he was out with an illness today. I think he's back. Hardman's ab injury, not participant. Or, I mean, that pretty much is this solidifying for you, Richmond? Tony is the way to go.
He is the man.
Okay.
I think Patrick Mahomes is his second biggest fan to me, so I think he's going to continue to get more opportunity in that target in that offense.
Now, Richmond. Pat Mahomes is a great QB. He is also the one that wanted them to draft CEH.
If you didn't say it, I was going to say it.
So can we really trust Pat Mahomes' judgment?
He's an ace scout.
Like, that's all I'm saying.
Look, man, you gotta get a few wrong before you get one right.
You gotta call Case Keenum before you call Kadarius Toney. Them's the rules.
Them's the rules. Okay, well, you know what? We'll see. We'll see how it all shakes out. Another illness, Jamal Williams. RB1 for Detroit, just like we all thought at the beginning of the year. Another ab injury, Devontae Adams with an ab injury, but he was limited participant today. So I think you're firing up Adams this week. Brandon Cooks was not participating today. Richmond, do we think that's just kind of his weekly Wednesday not doing anything?
I would say so. I mean, plus, who knows? Maybe he's holding out again. Who knows?
I mean, that's always possible.
Yeah,
he wanted to be traded to the Chiefs.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. But you know who did? Kadarius Toney.
Elite.
Tony. Nico Collins, limited participant. Wide receiver 2 there at Houston. Eric, you playing a lot of Nico Collins lately?
None. But actually, I think that he has a reasonable target share, and I think if you're in a pinch, I might trust Nico after a lot of guys.
There's worse plays. Yeah. He's solid for an 8 to 10 point week.
He had a solid game last week. I mean, he had like 50 yards and a touchdown on 10 targets.
He doesn't have those blow up weeks. Just something to keep an eye on, Jamar Chase going forward. How long? I don't know where we're at off the top of my head with his injury now.
I saw earlier that he is still on crutches. So
so never mind. Don't
take that for what you will.
So probably not super soon then. Let's just think 2 to 3 weeks from now. Think about what I'm saying now.
I think he's 3 weeks in or 4 weeks in.
Okay. But they never put him on IR, right?
They thought that he would have superhuman talent, literally. Like they thought that he had the physical acumen to recover from this injury faster than IR.
Well, if he was a true athlete, he would recover faster. That's all I'm saying. Njoku, not participating today with his ankle issue. We've talked about that. High ankle sprains are really hard to come back from. Ezekiel Elliott, limited participant today, has missed a couple games with his knee issue. Richmond, we think Zeke's coming back soon.
I think he'll be back soon. I think that was alluded to today that he's expected to be back soon. I mean, I know Jerry Jones just says whatever he wants to say, but
Trust me, I'm a Cowboys fan. I know. He literally just says stuff. But
in between bites of McDonald's.
I hate Jerry. I'm convinced we're not winning a Super Bowl till he dies, but he sold his soul in the 90s for those three. But anyway, I digress. We got a couple of Chargers receivers, the weekly Keenan Allen report, and Mike Williams possibly returning. They were both limited participants today. Eric, how do we feel about those two?
I mean, very skeptical of their production after these types of injuries. I think even if they suit up, you have to temper your expectations. But Keenan Allen, I mean, he's got the type of injury where it's a soft tissue, just re-aggravation injury. He could return any week. It's really up to him and how he feels he can play. Mike Williams, he's on the early end of our expectation for recovery from a high ankle injury. So, I mean, I would guess that he waits another week, especially if they're growing in optimism about Keenan Allen's availability. But I think if I'm having to fire them up, I'm also looking to make other moves just in case I get a dud.
Yeah, and if they aren't going, Josh Palmer is looking like a solid fill-in for them.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, guys, that pretty much does all the injury news, I think. Did we miss anyone?
In lighter news, DeAndre Swift was a full participant in today's practice.
Oh, good. He'll get 6 carries this week.
7. I think they're trying to ramp him up. So
oh, good. Yeah. Good. Oh, goodness. Yeah, DeAndre Swift, he's been a bummer this year.
He's been fancy Antonio Gibson. I'm not wrong.
Yeah, sure. All right. Richmond, talked about your flag plant, even though you already have multiple times, but
I don't know if you guys have heard about this. Our Lord and Savior, Kadarius Toney. That is my flag plant. I think that Patrick Mahomes continues to force him to be integrated into the offense, and I think I've said enough on this topic.
Cool. Eric, who you got?
This week's flag plant, I am sticking with the NFC East love. It is going to be Devonta Smith. I think that we've seen enough by now from the Eagles to know that it's either an A.J. Brown game, a Dallas Goedert game, or a Devonta Smith game. They can't put all three out there in mass production. And with A.J. Brown hobbling around a little bit with what seems to be like a low-grade ankle sprain, Dallas Goedert definitely out. I think it gives Devonta Smith a ton of targets this next week, and I think they're going to be looking to rebound after what seemed to be like an embarrassing loss to my Washington Commanders.
Yeah, I mean, the Commanders, they're not bad. Taylor Heinicke,
it was unexpected, I think. But
it was. And they needed how many turnovers to help? And
that Taylor Heinicke roughing the passer call.
What? There were a number of calls against the Commanders too. I mean, I digress.
All right. All I'm going to say is by the letter of the rule book, it was the correct call.
Same referee that called offensive pass interference on the Commanders wide receiver is the one that called.
That was a terrible call too.
So
those are both almost equally terrible calls.
They almost cancel out.
You would say that. You would say they cancel out.
I would say that.
Well, my flag plant, I'm going with David Montgomery now that he doesn't have that pesky Khalil Herbert nipping at his heels. Should get the bulk of the running back work there, whatever Justin Fields leaves for him to do. So they're also playing Atlanta. That helps. the situation. It's a bottom of the barrel teams there, even though Atlanta's competing for a playoff spot. But yeah, I don't know. David Montgomery, fire him up.
I
Sell
like
him
it.
in Dynasty if you can. Well, that pretty much does it. Richmond, any closing thoughts?
No, I hold them all in. My passion for Kadarius Toney,
Hey,
I think at this point has become a
Kane,
meme. So
We got some time here. We can talk about Tony
Kane.
some more. Eric, any closing thoughts?
No, I'm good. But you can find me on Twitter at @FF_Nighthawk.
Yes. And you can find me on Twitter at Fantasy Ferret. I too do not have any closing thoughts. Just want to say thank you for tuning in. If you did, and thank you for Gridiron Ratings for helping us put this on, and hopefully some players stay healthy this week. Adios.